The gunfight began with a door and a breath. Rhea Calder pushed through the swinging doors of the bridal lamp as dusk bled into the horizon. Heat rolled off the card tables. Whiskey stung the air. The piano tried to hold a tune, but stumbled like a drunk with secrets. Dust clung to her boots, her coat heavy with miles. Under the brim of her hat, her eyes stayed sharp, cool, unreadable. At the far end of the bar stood a man who didn't belong to the noise. Beckett Vale. A scar traced his jaw like an unfinished word. He leaned on the counter, silent, his presence steady in a room full of restless souls. His coat carried the kind of dust that never truly leaves a man. Rhea caught his glance, brief and electric. Two lives crossing without reason, yet somehow fated. A shout broke the air, cards flew, accusations tangled with whiskey breath. The dealer's hand twitched toward the gun under the table. Chairs scraped. Boots shifted. Someone reached too fast. The first shot cracked the night open. Smoke bloomed. Panic scattered. The piano went mute. Rhea dropped behind a barrel, instinct pulling her low. A lantern shattered, fire flaring against the bar. Beckett moved through it calm as a man walking to prayer. His revolver rose, glinted once in the flame, and barked. The dealer's gun spun across the floor, clattering into silence. She saw the next move before it happened. A boy barely grown, aiming a shaking pistol at a croupier who didn't deserve to die for bad company. Rhea moved fast. Her hand pressed down the boy's barrel. "Not this path," she whispered. He froze, eyes wide, then fled through the door, boots slapping rain-soaked wood. Across the room, another man aimed at Beckett's back. Rhea didn't think, just drew and fired. The echo cracked the tension wide open. The man fell. Silence followed, thick and startled. Beckett turned, smoke curling between them. Respect flickered in his eyes, quiet and sure. He stepped closer. "You saved me," he said. "You saved the room," she replied. Luann Drake, the saloon's owner, appeared with her shotgun and the voice of authority. "Enough! I sell whiskey, not funerals." The patrons lowered their eyes. The storm outside pressed against the windows. Rhea knew the sheriff wouldn't come. Men like him always arrived after the dying was done. Beckett checked the man she'd shot. No pulse. His expression stayed still, unreadable. "Rhea Calder, right?" She nodded. "And you are?" Beckett Vale. A low rumble of thunder rolled through the valley. Wind slipped through the broken glass, carrying rain and the smell of iron. The world outside waited, wide and restless. "You passing through?" he asked. "Always." He gave a faint nod. "Trouble finds me when I stay." "Maybe trouble follows anyone who looks like they've got something worth taking," she murmured. His gaze softened, just enough to warm the air between them. They helped Luann sweep up the wreckage. The act was small, but it steadied the room. Beckett's quiet presence beside her, the hush of broom bristles against the floor, the hum of the piano man retuning his strings. When Beckett handed her a glass of water, their fingers brushed. A spark. Subtle, undeniable. It lingered in the space between breaths. Outside, the rain thickened. Then a rider burst through the door, soaked and shaking. "Bandits, South Road! Wagon hit near the arroyo! Sheriff's calling for any steady hand!" Cards stilled. Eyes looked away. No one moved. Rhea's jaw clenched. She knew that kind of silence. The silence of men who had already chosen not to help. She met Beckett's gaze. No words needed. She simply said, "I'm going." He answered, "Then I'll ride with you." Lightning flashed, silvering his face, all resolve and quiet fire. Rhea felt something steady inside her shift. She didn't owe him trust, but she gave him presence. And that was more. They stepped into the storm. The town behind them flickered with lamplight and shame. Saddles creaked, hooves sank into wet earth. The wind pushed against them like it wanted to test their worth. And as they rode into the dark, the road ahead opened wide and uncertain, carrying two strangers bound by gunfire and something slower, deeper, waiting to be named. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The rain hasn't finished telling its tale yet. The rain fell harder as they left Sundown Ridge behind. It came in sheets, silver and cold, washing the dust from their coats and the noise from their minds. The land stretched open, dark mesas, slick rock, a sky torn by lightning. Every sound carried, the horses' breaths, the squeak of wet leather, the slow rhythm of two hearts trying to remember trust. Rhea rode with her hat low, eyes fixed on the narrow track that wound south through the mud. The storm blurred the line between sky and earth. Beside her, Beckett rode silent, his outline steady against the flash of white fire. His horse, a roan with a scar down one leg, moved like a creature that had known storms before. Neither spoke for a while. Silence worked better than words in places where thunder spoke for God. When they reached the edge of the arroyo, Rhea lifted her hand. "Here," she said. Wagon tracks, half drowned in rain, split and vanished into a cluster of boulders. One groove cut deep into the soft ground, then swerved right. She slid off her horse, crouched low, and touched the soil. Mud clung to her glove. "A broken wheel," she murmured. "They didn't get far." Beckett scanned the ridge above. Bandits from Dry Spine ride this stretch. Scar on the neck, red scarf, bad aim, worse temper. Her jaw tightened. "You know them?" He nodded once. "Used to ride near their camp, before I learned better." Rhea's eyes lifted, steady and unreadable. "Then maybe this is your chance to learn something new." A sound cut through the rain. A cry. Weak. Human. They moved as one. Around a bend, they found the wagon half-tipped in the mud, its left wheel sunk deep. Lantern light trembled beneath the torn tarp. A woman lay pinned under the edge, her face pale and twisted in pain. Rhea dropped to her knees, shoved the canvas aside. "Easy now." "My boy." The woman's voice broke. "They took him. 3 of them." Rhea looked to Beckett. His expression hardened. "We'll find him." Together they freed the woman's leg, dragging her to a patch of dry earth under a bent cedar. Beckett built a small fire, coaxing flame from rain-damp wood with a patience that spoke of long practice. Rhea tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapped the woman's wound, and waited for her breathing to slow. When the fire finally took, its light spilled gold against the woman's trembling face. Beckett's eyes reflected it too, steady, amber, quiet. "You didn't hesitate back there," he said softly. Rhea didn't look up. "Hesitation gets people buried." He studied her a moment. "Still, most folks would have turned away." "Once," she said, voice low, Someone turned away from me. I remember the sound of it. The rain hissed on the coals. Beckett didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sometimes silence was mercy. The woman slept, her breathing even now. Rhea stood and stepped into the rain again, the fire at her back. The horizon flickered. She could almost see the line of the cliffs to the south. Beckett joined her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You still mean to go after them?" "I do." "You could stay," he said. "Wait till daylight." She turned, eyes fierce under the brim. "And if it were your kin, would you?" He smiled without joy. "I never had any left to wait for." The words hung between them, heavy as thunder. She wanted to ask, but didn't. The desert didn't take kindly to questions that cut too deep. Before dawn, they saddled up again. The woman would be found by sunrise. Rhea left her water, Beckett left half a blanket. Then they rode south, following the broken trail through the mist. The storm had slowed to a soft drizzle, painting the mesas in pale blue light. The air smelled of wet dust and mesquite. Somewhere ahead, the faint curl of smoke rose against the morning sky. Beckett reined in. "Their camp," he said. Rhea followed his gaze. 3 horses were tied near the mouth of an old mine, their reins dragging in the mud. A child's sob drifted faintly from the shadows. Her hand went to her holster. "We'll go quiet," he nodded. "I'll cover your left." She slipped between the rocks, feet silent on the wet stone. Beckett moved beside her, rifle low, eyes sharp. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat, tracing a line down his jaw. Closer now. The boy's cry again, thinner, pleading. Rhea's pulse steadied. Her breath matched the rhythm of the storm. Beckett's whisper reached her ear, warm even in the cold. "When you move, I move." "Then don't miss," she breathed back. Lightning flashed. For an instant their faces were the only bright things in a world gone dark. 2 souls drawn by danger, held by something far more dangerous still. Boots shifted ahead. A bandit's voice muttered. Rhea felt her muscles tighten. Not fear, purpose. The storm paused, holding its breath, and then everything happened at once. The rain still carried secrets, and the night wasn't through testing their hearts. The gunfire began before the lightning faded. Rhea dropped low behind a rock, mud splashing her boots. Beckett was already on one knee, rifle braced steady, eyes narrowed through the stormlight. The first bandit came out shouting, his red scarf bright against the grey. He fired wild, too high, too fast. Beckett's shot answered clean, quiet, final. The second man stumbled from the mine entrance, dragging the boy in front of him like a shield. The kid's small face twisted with fear, pale against the rain. "Stay back," the bandit roared. "One more step and—" He never finished. Rhea was already moving. A streak of dark coat, her revolver flashing once. The man's arm jerked, the gun fell, and the boy bolted toward the rocks. Beckett reached out, pulled the child behind him just as another bullet cut the air. The third outlaw ran for the ridge. Rhea chased. The mud slid under her boots. Wind whipped her coat open like wings. She fired once, missed, then again. Metal met thunder. The man fell into the dust, the storm swallowing the echo. When she turned back, the rain had slowed to a mist. Beckett knelt beside the boy, checking for wounds. The child trembled, but his eyes were alive, wide, full of disbelief and tears. "You're safe now," Beckett said softly, voice like gravel and warmth. Rhea crouched beside them. "What's your name, son?" "Eli," he whispered. "Mama, she's alive," Rhea said. "We found her. You'll see her soon." Eli nodded, small hands gripping Beckett's coat. The man didn't pull away. His palm rested on the boy's back, solid as a mountain, steady as a promise. Rhea watched that touch, the quiet way he offered safety without words. It stirred something deep in her chest, something she hadn't felt since long before she'd stopped believing in rescue. Beckett met her eyes over the boy's head. "We need to move. That shot might bring more of them." She nodded. "I know a way north. Old ranch trail cuts through the cliffs." They mounted quickly, Eli riding between them. The trail was narrow, slick with rain, but the sky had begun to open. A faint band of silver light stretched along the horizon. Dawn, soft and slow, like forgiveness. Halfway up the ridge, Rhea's horse slipped. Beckett reached over, caught her arm, held her steady. For a moment their faces were inches apart. The wind pressed close, full of wet earth and heartbeat. "You all right?" he asked. "I've been worse," she said, breathless, but she didn't look away. He smiled faintly, just enough to reach his eyes. "You're something else, Calder." "So are you, Vale." They rode on, silent again. But the silence was different now. Less distance, more pull. When they reached the top, the valley spread below them. The mine, the wrecked wagon, the faint glow of fire in the storm's wake. It all looked small, like a memory already fading. Rhea breathed in deep. The air was sharp and cold and clean. Eli slept against Beckett's chest, safe. The man's arms circled the boy like instinct. Rhea's gaze softened. "You handle a gun like it's a prayer." Beckett kept his eyes on the road ahead. "And you shoot like you've got nothing left to lose." "Maybe I don't." He looked at her then. "Or maybe you're still figuring out what's worth keeping." His words landed quiet but deep, like water finding stone. She didn't answer. The truth in his tone didn't need one. By the time they reached the ridge pass, the sun had broken through the clouds, thin and pale. They stopped to rest the horses, letting them drink from the rain pools gathered in the stone. Rhea crouched by the edge, washing the mud from her hands. Her reflection rippled in the water. Hard eyes, soft mouth, a face caught between hunger and healing. Behind her, Beckett lifted Eli gently down, wrapped the boy in his coat, and built a small fire from dry sage he found under an overhang. The smoke rose straight up into the new light. "Sleep now," he told the child. "We'll take you home, come morning." Rhea watched the way his hand lingered on the boy's shoulder, protective without claiming, gentle without weakness. It struck her that this was the kind of strength she hadn't known could exist, a strength that didn't need to prove itself by breaking something. When Beckett finally sat beside her, she said quietly, "You didn't have to come with me tonight." He shook his head. Didn't have to. Wanted to. Something unspoken moved between them, something the storm had not washed away. The fire crackled, small and golden in the dawn. The boy slept. The desert exhaled. And for the first time in years, Rhea felt the edges of safety curl around her, warm as the first sun after rain. If this story has found a quiet place inside you, stay close. The road ahead still hides what hearts aren't ready to face. The road back to Sundown Ridge was quiet. Morning light spread across the desert, soft and golden, touching everything it had nearly drowned the night before. The rain had washed the world clean. Even the air smelled new, like sage and second chances. Rhea rode ahead, the brim of her hat shadowing her eyes. Behind her, Beckett held Eli close, the boy's small hands tucked against his chest. The child slept, head against Beckett's shoulder, safe in the rhythm of hoofbeats and heartbeats. No one spoke for a long while. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, the kind that lets pain breathe before it fades. When the rooftops of the town appeared through the low mist, Rhea slowed. Her throat tightened, though she couldn't have said why. Maybe it was the sight of home that wasn't hers, or the weight of a night that had changed the shape of the air between her and the man riding behind. Luann was waiting outside the saloon when they rode in. Her grey braid was slick with rain, eyes sharp but kind. The rescued woman sat beside her on the porch, leg bandaged, face pale with worry. When she saw Eli, she broke into a sound that was half sob, half prayer. "Eli!" The boy stirred, blinked awake, then scrambled down from Beckett's arms. He ran straight into his mother's embrace. She folded around him, shaking, laughing, crying all at once. Rhea turned away to give them their moment. Beckett didn't move. He stood a few steps back, hat low, as if the reunion was too sacred for a man like him to witness too closely. Luann touched Rhea's shoulder. "You did good, girl." Rhea shrugged, eyes on the dust. "We both did." Beckett looked up then, and for the first time that morning, his mouth curved into something close to a smile. The town began to stir. The blacksmith lighting his forge, a dog barking down the street, the soft thud of doors opening. Ordinary life reclaiming what the night had tried to take. Luann's voice carried from the porch. "There's coffee inside, and whiskey if you've got ghosts to chase out." Beckett glanced at Rhea. "Which do you take?" She met his gaze, half a smile tugging at her lips. "Whiskey chases slower." He chuckled, low and warm. "Then whiskey it is." They stepped into the bridal lamp. The saloon smelled of fresh sawdust and firewood. Someone had replaced the broken glass and wiped away the blood. The piano man played something soft, like an apology to the morning. Rhea dropped into the same chair she ducked behind the night before. Beckett poured 2 glasses, the amber liquid catching the light. "Not often you see a story end clean," he said, sliding one toward her. "Stories don't end," she replied. "They just wait until we circle back." He watched her over the rim of his glass. "You sound like someone who's done a lot of circling." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I just never learned how to stop." For a while they drank in silence. The warmth of the whiskey spread slow, unhurried. Outside the sun climbed higher, turning the rain puddles to mirrors. Finally Beckett spoke. "You ever think about staying put?" Rhea looked up sharply. "Staying's never done me much good." "Still," he said, voice quiet, "the ground feels different when someone waits for you." She laughed softly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "And who'd do the waiting, Beckett Vale?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, gaze drifting to the window. "Not sure. Maybe someone who shoots straighter than she smiles." Rhea's heart gave a small, unsteady jolt. "Careful," she said. "That sounds like a feeling." "Maybe it is," he said simply. The moment hung there, tender and dangerous. The piano faded. The light turned warm on the wood. Then Luann's voice broke the stillness. "Sheriff's looking for you two," she said from the doorway. "Says he's got questions about last night." Rhea sighed, pushing back her chair. "He always does." Beckett rose too. "You planning to tell him the truth?" She adjusted her hat. "I'll tell him what keeps him quiet." He grinned. "I like your kind of honesty." They stepped out into the street. The town had dried under the sun, but the air still smelled faintly of storm. Rhea watched Eli run in circles near his mother, laughter ringing through the quiet. The sound slipped past her armor before she could stop it. Beckett stood beside her, the brim of his hat low, hands resting easy on his belt. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "What does?" "Saving something worth saving." She looked at him then, the wind brushing stray strands of hair across her face. "You think we did?" "I know we did." For a while, they just stood there, side by side, watching the desert breathe again. The storm had passed, but not everything it stirred had settled. Some things, Rhea knew, didn't fade with the rain. They stayed, quiet, patient, waiting for the next spark. And somewhere deep inside she felt it too, that pull, that unspoken promise that the road between them wasn't done. Not yet. If this story has touched a tender place in you, stay close. The calm after the storm can be louder than the thunder itself. By the next morning, Sundown Ridge had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels borrowed, fragile, temporary, like the calm between one heartbeat and the next. Rhea woke before sunrise, the saloon still asleep behind her. She sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the light spill over the desert. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, left it raw and wide. She could smell the earth, still wet, still remembering the rain. Her horse nickered softly from the hitching post. She'd thought about leaving before dawn, before words or looks or promises could tangle her feet. But something held her there. A feeling she didn't have a name for, heavy as dust and just as familiar. Footsteps came up behind her. Beckett's boots, slow, even, the kind that spoke of long trails and longer regrets. "Didn't figure you for the waiting type," he said. "I'm not," she replied, not turning. "Guess the coffee's slower than I thought." He eased down beside her, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. The morning light caught the faint scar on his jaw. It looked softer now, less like a wound, more like a memory. "I used to ride with men like them," he said finally. "The ones from the mine." Rhea didn't answer. She just let the words hang there, like smoke waiting for a wind. "Didn't take much to fall in with the wrong trail," he went on. "A gun, a hunger, a reason to forget your name for a while." She turned then, eyes steady on his. "And what brought you back?" He took a long breath. "A woman. Sheriff's wife. She believed I was better than I knew how to be. I tried to prove her right. Failed. She's buried north of here." The quiet that followed was the kind that could break or mend something, depending on who spoke next. Rhea set her cup down, thumb tracing the chipped edge. "We all got ghosts," she said softly. "Some just ride louder." His gaze met hers, and for the first time it wasn't guarded. It was human, tired, open, searching. Before either of them could speak again, a rider galloped into town, dust rising behind like a second storm. He pulled up hard in front of the saloon, breathless. "Trouble by the canyon," he shouted. "2 men dead, another missing. Looks like the Dry Spine gang again." Rhea's jaw clenched. Beckett's eyes darkened, every trace of rest gone. "They're back," she said. He stood, pulling his hat down low. They never left. Luann stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, as if she'd already known the news before the man arrived. "You two going after them again?" Rhea gave a faint smile. "Seems the desert's not done with us." Beckett swung into his saddle, the sun glinting off his revolver. "Then let's finish what the storm started." Rhea mounted beside him. The town watched, a few faces at windows, whispers following like wind. As they rode out, the morning stretched ahead in pale gold and silence. But the quiet wasn't peace. It was a warning. Rhea could feel it in her bones, the kind of stillness that comes before something breaks. She glanced sideways at Beckett. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the horizon. But beneath the steel there was something softer now, a thread of connection, invisible but strong, like the pull of rain toward the earth. "You ever think maybe the desert keeps calling us back because it knows what we owe it?" she asked. Beckett didn't look at her. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it just wants to see who survives the second time." The words sat between them, quiet and heavy. The sound of hooves filled the rest, a slow rhythm, steady as heartbeat. By midday, the heat rose again, drawing ghosts out of the sand. They rode until the canyon opened before them, wide, red, waiting. Rhea pulled on her reins, scanning the trail below. There, fresh tracks, 3 horses, and drag marks through the dust. Beckett's voice dropped low. "They've taken someone else." She nodded. "Then we don't stop till we find them." The wind rose, curling through the canyon like a whisper of something old and unfinished. Beckett looked at Rhea, and she saw it. Not the outlaw he'd been, not the stranger she'd met in the gunfire, but the man beneath it all, quiet, scarred, and worth the danger. They rode into the canyon together, and somewhere in the shadows, the past waited, patient, smiling. If this story has lingered somewhere deep inside you, stay close. The desert remembers every promise left unfinished. The canyon swallowed sound like a secret. Only the horses' breaths broke the stillness. Slow, steady, cautious. Dust lifted in thin veils as Rhea and Beckett rode deeper between the red walls. The heat pressed close now, thick enough to taste. Somewhere ahead, the wind carried voices, faint, male, laughing. Rhea raised her hand. Beckett halted beside her, eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. They dismounted in silence, tying their horses beneath a ledge of stone. The air smelled of gun oil and smoke. She crouched low, peering through the brush. 3 men sat near a dying fire. One cleaned his revolver, another paced, spitting into the dust. The third, older, taller, with a scar carved deep into his neck, leaned against the rock, grinning like a man who'd never forgotten cruelty. Beckett froze when he saw him. The change was small, but Rhea felt it. A tightening in the air, a shift in breath. "That one," she whispered. "The scar." Beckett's jaw locked. "Name's Riker. Used to ride under him." Rhea's eyes flicked toward him. "You were one of them." "Was," he said quietly, "till I wasn't." The wind dragged through the canyon, pulling their words apart before they could turn to judgment. Rhea studied him, the quiet shame in his eyes, the weight in his shoulders. It wasn't weakness, it was history. "Then this is your reckoning," she said. He gave a small nod. "Ours." They moved together, shadows against stone. The outlaws didn't see them until it was too late. Rhea fired first. One clean shot, a man falling backward into the sand. Beckett stepped out from cover, rifle leveled. Riker turned, grin widening when recognition struck. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Beckett Vale, the ghost himself." "Not a ghost," Beckett said. "Just a man finishing what he started." Riker laughed, the sound rough as gravel. "You still think you're better than us? You walked out, left your brothers to hang." "They weren't brothers," Beckett said. "They were thieves with fancy words." Riker spat. "You owed us blood." Beckett's voice came low, steady. "I'm paying it now." The gunfight was quick, brutal, loud enough to wake the canyon. Rhea moved like water, every step precise, her revolver an extension of breath. Beckett's shots found their marks. 2 bodies hit the ground, one after another. Riker staggered, wounded but still standing, a wild grin splitting his face. He fired. Beckett went down hard. "Beckett!" Rhea shouted, spinning toward him. Blood darkened his sleeve, but he was alive. She dropped beside him, hand pressed against the wound. Riker's shadow fell across them, gun still raised. "Always knew you'd die trying to play hero," Riker sneered. Rhea rose slow, eyes cold as rain. "And I always shoot to stop, not to talk." She fired once. The echo slammed off the stone. Riker fell backward, dust rising like smoke from his body. The canyon went silent again. Only wind moved, whispering through the sage. Rhea knelt beside Beckett. His breath was shallow but strong. "You're lucky," she said. He managed a faint grin. "You call this lucky? Still breathing, aren't you?" He chuckled once, then winced. "You always this gentle with the dying?" "Only the ones who don't deserve it." Her hand lingered on his arm longer than it needed to. His skin was warm, slick with blood and grit. When he met her gaze, something unguarded passed between them, the kind of look that belonged to people who'd already risked everything and found something left worth losing. She tore a strip from her shirt and bound his wound, tight and careful. "You're good at this," he murmured. "Had practice," she said. "The world doesn't hand out safety. You build it yourself." When he tried to rise, she steadied him. He leaned into her, weight and warmth pressing close. For the first time, she didn't pull away. They buried the bodies under stones. Beckett said nothing while they worked. The sun climbed higher, baking silence into every surface. When they were done, Rhea handed him his hat. "You finished what you started," he nodded. "Doesn't feel like winning." "Reckon it never does." They stood there a long time, 2 silhouettes against the endless red of the canyon. The fight was done, but the ache it left behind would take longer to fade. Beckett looked at her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "You didn't have to stay." She met his gaze. "Maybe I wanted to." A long pause. Then he said, "I'm starting to think maybe the desert doesn't break people. Maybe it just shows them what's left when the breaking's done." Rhea smiled faintly. "Then I guess we've both seen what's left." He nodded. and it's still standing. They turned toward the horses, the canyon behind them quiet again, their shadows stretching long across the stone. As they rode out, the wind carried only one sound, the soft rhythm of hooves, and a promise neither of them dared to speak. If this story has settled somewhere in your chest, let it stay. The heart knows the weight of silence better than any storm. They found shelter in the ruins of an old line cabin near the canyon's edge. A single room, half collapsed, roof patched with rusted tin and prayer. The wind howled through its seams, but it was dry, and that was enough. Rhea guided Beckett inside, easing him down near the cold hearth. His face was pale beneath the brim of his hat, jaw clenched tight against the pain. The wound had slowed bleeding, but his breath came shallow. "Stay still," she said, voice steady but soft. "You pull that stitch open, and I'll have to shoot you just to keep you quiet." He managed a weak grin. "You'd miss me." "Maybe," she said, though her hands didn't tremble as she tore another strip from her sleeve and soaked it in whiskey. The smell of it filled the room, sharp, familiar. She cleaned the wound, gentle as she could manage, but his jaw still tightened beneath her fingers. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he said through a breath. "Feels like proof I'm still here." When she finished binding his arm, she leaned back against the wall, exhausted. Outside, the wind had softened into a low hum, like the desert itself was catching its breath. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet rasp of the fire she'd coaxed to life and the slow rhythm of Beckett's breathing. He broke the silence first. "You ever get tired of running?" Rhea stared into the flames. "Running's the only thing I've ever been good at." "I don't believe that." She gave a low laugh. "Then you haven't known me long enough." Beckett shifted, wincing, but his voice stayed calm. "I've known the look in your eyes since the night we met. That's not running. That's surviving." His words caught her off guard. She wanted to brush them aside, turn them into something easier, but they stayed, warm, steady, undeniable. "You talk like a man who's done his share of surviving too," she said. He nodded once. "Difference is, I got tired of doing it alone." The fire cracked softly. Outside, the night settled deep. Rhea's throat tightened in a way she didn't expect. She turned away from him, pretending to check the bandage again, but her voice came lower now. "You should rest." "Can't," he said quietly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him, Riker, the things I let him make me do." She looked at him then, really looked, saw the shame behind his calm, the weight he'd carried too long. "You're not that man anymore." "Maybe not," he said, "but I still know how he thought. That kind of rot doesn't wash off easy." Rhea reached for the bottle, poured a little whiskey into her palm, and rubbed it across his skin where blood had dried. Her touch was firm but careful, tracing the line of his arm, his shoulder, the edge of his collarbone. He closed his eyes. For a long time they stayed like that. No words, just the fire's glow and the quiet exchange of warmth between two people who didn't know how to name what was happening. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "You think people like us can ever stop fighting?" He opened his eyes, met hers. "Only if we find something worth fighting for instead." Her breath caught. "And you?" "Maybe I already have." The words hung there, suspended between them like the glow of embers refusing to die. She looked away first, breaking the spell with motion. Standing, crossing the room, pulling an old blanket from a shelf. "Sleep," she said, her tone softer than she meant it to be. "You'll need your strength by morning." He smiled faintly, eyes closing as the weight of exhaustion finally won. Rhea watched him for a while, the rise and fall of his chest, the line of his mouth, the shadow of his hand still resting near where hers had been. Something deep in her chest shifted, slow and certain. The desert outside whispered through the cracks in the walls. The fire burned low, throwing gentle light across his face. She could feel it now, the thing she'd been running from all these years. It wasn't danger. It wasn't pain. It was belonging. She sat near the fire until dawn stretched pale across the sand, guarding his sleep, like she was guarding something fragile and new. If this story has found its way under your skin, let it stay. The quiet after the storm is where hearts start to learn their shape. Morning crept in, slow, soft as a sigh. The first light slipped through the cracks in the roof, brushing over Beckett's face, over the edge of the blanket, over Rhea's hand where it rested near his. She hadn't meant to fall asleep there. Somewhere between the silence and the warmth of the fire, her body had given in. When she stirred, Beckett was already awake, watching her in that quiet way of his, steady, unreadable, but with something new flickering behind the calm. "You don't sleep easy," he said. "Never had much reason to." He smiled faintly. "You keep staring at the door like you're waiting for it to leave before you do." She stood, brushing the dust from her coat. "Doors are meant to be used." He didn't argue, just sat up slowly, testing his arm. The bandage held. He winced, but managed a breath that wasn't all pain. "You did good work." Rhea reached for her hat. "I've been patching bullet holes longer than I care to count." "And running," he added. Her eyes narrowed. "You keep saying that like you know me." "I don't," he said simply. "But I know the look of someone who wants to go before she's asked to stay." The words hit harder than she liked. She turned away, pretended to check the horses through the gap in the wall. "We should move soon. They'll send more men once they find Riker." Beckett rose slowly, leaning a hand against the table for balance. "You could head north, toward the hills. No one would follow you there." She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "And you?" "I'll head south. Sheriff will want to hear what happened. Might be time I stopped hiding." A muscle tightened in her jaw. "You think the law forgives a man for changing his mind?" He smiled, tired, honest. "No, but maybe it listens when he means it." For a long moment, neither spoke. Dust drifted between them like slow snow. The air felt too full, too fragile. Then Beckett said quietly, "You saved my life twice." "Only one of those times was on purpose," she said. He laughed softly, and it warmed something in her she hadn't realized was cold. Rhea reached for her saddlebag, tightening the straps with hands that didn't want to finish. "I'll leave before the heat hits." "You always say it like that," he said. "Like you owe goodbye nothing." She met his gaze. "Maybe I don't." Beckett stepped closer, slow, careful. His shadow brushed hers on the floor. "You do," he said, his voice low. "You just forgot how to give it." Rhea's breath caught. The morning light made his eyes look softer, gold around the edges. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The wind, the dust, the noise in her chest that always told her to keep moving. He lifted a hand, not to stop her, but to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was barely there, but it unravelled her like a whispered truth. "Rhea," he said, her name steady in his mouth. "You don't have to run from what already found you." She stepped back, breath shaky. "You don't know what I'm running from." He held her gaze. "Then stay long enough to let me find out." The words hung there, fragile as the morning light. She wanted to tell him no. Wanted to walk out into the desert and let the miles erase the ache behind her ribs. But when she looked at him, the way he stood there, still hurting, still open, she realized distance wouldn't change a thing. Her voice came soft. "You should rest more." "I will," he said. "If you're still here when I wake up again." She turned to the doorway, sunlight washing across the threshold. Her hand hovered on the frame. For a long time she didn't move. Then she let the door swing shut again and crossed back to the fire. "Fine," she said. "One more sunrise." Beckett smiled, slow and quiet. "That's all a man needs." She sat down across from him, the fire between them, the air trembling with things neither dared to name. Outside, the desert stirred. A hawk cried high above the cliffs. The day waited, and somewhere in that small broken cabin, two hearts finally stopped running, if only for a breath. If this story has settled softly inside you, stay close. Sometimes one sunrise can change the direction of a whole life. The desert morning was brighter than either of them expected. When Rhea stepped outside, the horizon stretched wide and endless, sunlight spilling over the canyon rim like gold poured from heaven. The air smelled of heat already rising from the sand, of juniper and something quieter. Peace, maybe. She hadn't smelled that in years. Beckett followed her out, his arm bound tight, steps slower but steady. The wound had stopped bleeding, though he moved like each breath still reminded him of what nearly ended him. "You should be lying down," she said without turning. He smiled. "And let you ride off while I'm sleeping. I might not be smart, but I'm not that dumb." She glanced back at him, the corner of her mouth softening despite herself. "You think I'd leave without saying something?" "I think you've done it before." Her silence was its own confession. The sun caught in her hair, lit her in firelight that wasn't from any flame. She looked toward the open plain, toward distance. That was the only direction she'd ever trusted. Beckett leaned against the doorway, studying her like a man memorizing something he knew he shouldn't keep. "Where were you headed before Sundown Ridge?" "Nowhere," she said. Then quieter, "Everywhere." He nodded. "That's a hard place to stay." She exhaled slowly. "It's easier than staying with people who always go." He didn't press her. He just stepped out into the sunlight and took in the view beside her. The pale dunes, the blue edge of sky, the hawk circling high like a promise it didn't plan to keep. After a moment he said, "There's a ranch 2 days north. Quiet land, good horses. Sheriff owes me a favor or two. You could start over there if you wanted." Rhea gave a short laugh. "You offering me work, Vale?" "I'm offering you peace," he said, eyes still on the horizon. "You've been carrying fight for too long." She turned to him, the wind lifting the edge of her coat. "And what about you?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'll see what it's like to stand still for once." The words landed gentle but deep. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to her horse, ran her hand down the reins. The animal nickered softly, brushing its nose against her wrist. "You ever think," she said, "maybe people like us were made for the road?" Beckett stepped closer, his voice low. "Maybe. But roads only matter because they lead somewhere." She looked up at him. "And where's yours leading?" He met her eyes, calm and unguarded. "Right now, here." The space between them stilled. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Her fingers curled slightly around the reins, but she didn't move. His nearness wasn't something that demanded, it invited. A warmth that didn't chase her, didn't corner her, just waited to be chosen. Finally she said, "If we go north, we'll have to cross Dry Creek by dusk." He nodded. "Then we should ride before the sun gets mean." It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. They saddled up in silence, the kind that felt like understanding. Beckett checked the cinch on her saddle, careful, steady. His touch brushed hers once, brief but enough to leave something humming under her skin. As they rode out, the cabin shrank behind them, swallowed by dust and distance. The trail wound through dry grass and low mesas, where the air shimmered like a mirage. Rhea led most of the way, her eyes scanning the land. Beckett followed close, letting her set the pace. By noon, they reached the ridge overlooking Dry Creek. The water below ran shallow, glinting like silver thread. Rhea dismounted first, filling her canteen, washing dust from her hands. Beckett knelt beside her, doing the same. Their reflections rippled side by side in the stream, two shapes blurred by motion, never still, never separate. "You ever think it's strange?" she asked suddenly. "What's that?" "That I barely know you, but I trust you more than anyone I've met in years." He smiled softly. "Not strange, just rare." She looked down at the water again. "Rare things don't last long out here." "Then maybe we take care not to lose it." Her eyes met his. Something in her chest shifted. Not fast, not fiery, just deep, like the earth moving under the rain. For a while they didn't speak. The desert spoke for them. Wind in the brush, water against stone, the whisper of horses grazing nearby. When the sun began to dip, painting everything in amber light, Beckett said quietly, "Rhea, you don't have to keep running. Not from me." She swallowed hard, the words catching somewhere between fear and wanting. "And if staying breaks me?" "Then we'll break together," he said. The simplicity of it undid her. And no promise, no claim, just truth. She stood there a long time, letting the moment breathe. Then she reached out, touched the back of his hand. Just once, just enough. The touch was quiet but complete, like a story finding its pause. As the last light faded over the canyon, they mounted again, riding north. Two silhouettes against a sky burning itself into night. The stars began to rise, slow and sure, the way trust does when you stop looking for it. If this story has stirred something gentle in you, let it linger. The night knows how to keep what dawn has just begun. Night settled slow and full around them. The desert cooled. The kind of cold that bit clean after heat had burned everything else away. Above, the sky was open. A black river scattered with stars, clear enough to make a soul believe in things it shouldn't. Rhea and Beckett rode close, their horses moving quiet along the ridge. The moon painted silver on their coats, on the curve of her jaw, on the scar along his arm. Neither spoke. Sometimes silence was the truest language between two people who had survived too much sound. After a while, Beckett said, "We'll make camp near those rocks ahead." Rhea nodded. Her voice was low, tired but calm. "Fine by me. The horses could use the rest." They stopped in a small hollow sheltered from the wind. Beckett built the fire while Rhea unpacked the blankets. Sparks rose like fireflies, catching the wind before fading into night. She sat across from him, knees drawn up, watching the light flicker over his face. It softened him, turned the lines of weariness into something quiet, something she could almost call peace. "How's the arm?" she asked. "Still attached," he said with a faint grin. "You do good work." She looked away, smirking. "Don't get used to it." "I don't patch up every stranger who crosses my trail." He leaned forward a little, elbows on his knees. "Am I still a stranger?" The fire cracked between them. For a long moment, she didn't answer. The sound of the flames filled the space where words would have been. Then, softly, "No, you're something else. I just don't know what to call it yet." Beckett smiled, slow and real. "You don't have to call it anything." Rhea tilted her head. "That easy, huh?" He shrugged. "Some things don't need names to be true." Her eyes stayed on him. The light from the fire reflected gold in their depths. For the first time, she let herself study him without defense. The rough line of his jaw, the steadiness in his gaze, the quiet that lived in him like an oath kept too long. "You talk like a preacher," she said. "I drink too much for that," he replied, and she laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere untouched by sorrow. When her laughter faded, he said, "You've got a good sound when you let it out." That caught her off guard. "My laugh?" "Yeah, it sounds like someone remembering how to breathe." Her smile faltered, not from discomfort, but from how close he'd gotten to something true. "You've got a way of seeing things people don't want seen. Guess I've spent enough nights trying not to be seen myself." The wind shifted. A chill slid through the hollow. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Beckett reached for another and tossed it to her, the motion casual but kind. "Thanks," she murmured. He nodded, leaning back against a rock, eyes half closed. "You plan on running again once we reach the ranch?" She hesitated. "Maybe. Depends on what's waiting there." He opened one eye. "And if it's peace?" She stared into the fire. "Peace is a strange thing. Makes me nervous." "Maybe it's not peace you're nervous of," he said quietly. "Maybe it's staying." She didn't answer. Couldn't. The words settled somewhere in her chest, heavy and warm. The fire burned low. The desert sang its old song, wind and distance and the soft sound of something finding its way home. Beckett spoke again, voice almost a whisper. "You ever wonder why we met that night?" Rhea smiled faintly, eyes still on the flames. "Because the world likes to test fools." "Maybe. Or maybe it's kinder than we think." She looked up at him. "You really believe that?" He met her gaze across the fire. "Right now, I do." The air between them thickened, slow and sweet. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty. It was waiting. Rhea's heartbeat matched the crackle of flame. The world around them blurred until there was only this, the glow of the fire, the steady rhythm of their breathing, the pull of something that didn't ask permission. Beckett reached across the space and brushed her hand, light as dust. His fingers lingered just a second longer than they should have. She didn't pull away. The night folded around them, soft and endless. Later, as the fire dimmed and the stars leaned closer, Rhea whispered into the dark, "Maybe peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's someone." Beckett didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them said enough. If this story has warmed a quiet place inside you, stay close. The night still has things it hasn't told either of them yet. Dawn came slow, the kind that slips in quietly so the night doesn't notice it's leaving. Rhea woke first. The fire had gone to ash, a thin ribbon of smoke curling into the pale light. Beckett still slept across from her, one arm bent over his chest, hat tipped low to block the morning. The lines of exhaustion had eased. In the soft grey light, he looked younger, like the man he might have been before the world turned hard. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter. The air was cool, still touched by the night's chill. Somewhere nearby, a coyote called once and then stopped, as if remembering silence. Rhea stood and walked to the edge of the ridge. The desert below was painted in soft gold, the kind of beauty that hurt if you looked too long. Every color seemed to breathe, sand, sky, the slow turn of light across stone. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deep, letting the quiet settle inside her like truth. Behind her, she heard him stir. "Morning," Beckett said, voice low, rough with sleep. She turned. "You're supposed to be resting." "Hard to, when the world looks like that." He pushed his hat back and looked past her toward the horizon. "Never thought I'd see another morning like this one." Rhea smirked. "You plan on getting shot again any time soon?" He grinned, faint but real. "Not if I can help it. But if it meant waking up here again, I might think twice." She rolled her eyes, but the smile tugged at her lips anyway. Beckett rose slowly, testing his arm. It held. He walked to her side, stopping close enough that she could feel his warmth through the cool morning air. They stood like that, side by side, watching the sun climb over the far edge of the desert. For a long time, neither spoke. They didn't have to. When Beckett finally broke the silence, his voice was quiet. "You ever wonder if the desert forgives?" Rhea tilted her head. "For what?" "For what we take. What we leave behind." She thought for a moment. "Maybe it doesn't forgive. Maybe it just waits long enough for us to understand." He nodded, slow, like the words landed somewhere deep. She looked at him then, sunlight catching in his eyes. "You really mean to go back to that ranch?" "I do," he said. "It's quiet country, decent work, a chance to live like I've got more years ahead than behind." "And you think that's enough?" He turned to her, meeting her gaze. "I think it could be, with the right company." Her heart stumbled once, quick, then steadied. She looked away, down at the horses grazing by the rocks. "You always talk like that." "Only when I mean it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick with things unspoken, things both of them could feel but weren't ready to name. Rhea reached for her saddle, checking the cinch, fingers moving slow. "If we're heading north, we'll want to beat the heat." Beckett watched her for a moment longer, then nodded. "North it is." They rode out just as the sun cleared the ridge, their shadows stretching long across the sand. The world ahead shimmered with light and distance, both promise and warning. Hours passed without words. The rhythm of hooves filled the air, steady, patient, like a heartbeat that had finally found its pace. At midday, they stopped beneath a cluster of cottonwoods, the first trees they'd seen in miles. Rhea tied her horse, filled her hat with water from the stream, and offered it to Beckett. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was small, but it sent something through her, a warmth that wasn't just from the sun. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet. She nodded, turning away before her eyes betrayed more than she wanted them to. For a while they rested in the shade. The wind stirred the leaves, soft and low, like the sound of distant voices telling stories neither of them remembered, but both understood. Beckett leaned back against the tree. "You ever think about what comes after?" Rhea glanced at him. "After what?" "After the running, the fighting, the ghosts." She smiled, small and sad. "People like us don't get after. We just get between." He studied her face, the lines of weariness and strength, the way her eyes held the horizon like a promise. Maybe that's what after looks like. Not perfect, just still breathing. Her gaze softened. "You always find a way to make the hard things sound simple. Guess I've learned simplicity's worth more than gold." The wind shifted again. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured, but this time it wasn't a threat, just the sound of the world turning. Rhea leaned her head back against the saddle. "You really think a place like that ranch could change anything?" He smiled. "Maybe it doesn't have to change us. Maybe it just lets us stop long enough to remember who we were before all this." She looked at him then, eyes steady, voice low. "And who were you, Beckett Vale?" He thought for a moment. A man trying to be good in a world that didn't make room for it. The honesty in his tone hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. So instead, she reached for his hand, the gesture small, unplanned. He didn't move, just let his fingers close around hers, rough and warm and sure. The moment held, still and fragile, like the space between lightning and thunder. They stayed that way until the sun began to dip again, light bleeding gold across the plain. Then they let go, but the touch lingered in the air, invisible but alive. And as they rode on through the evening glow, neither of them looked back. Some journeys, Rhea thought, only move forward when your heart finally stops trying to return. If this story has stirred something quiet inside you, stay close. The dusk always tells its truth before the night begins again. By the time dusk fell, the desert had changed its face again. The heat bled out of the sand, and the first cool breath of evening carried the scent of sage and rain somewhere far away. The world glowed in copper and violet, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. Rhea and Beckett rode side by side, their shadows long and broken across the ground. The horses moved easy, tired but willing. They hadn't spoken in hours, and there was no need to. The quiet between them had grown comfortable, the kind that felt like belonging. When they crested a rise, Rhea slowed her horse. "There," she said, "I see lights. Must be the ranch." Below them, the land dipped into a wide plain. Fences cut through it like lines in an old map, and at the centre stood a small house with a warm glow in its windows. Smoke curled from a chimney, lazy and blue against the fading sky. Beckett let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "Didn't think we'd make it before dark." Rhea smiled faintly. "You doubted me." "Never," he said, glancing sideways at her. "Just didn't know how much I could trust my luck." She met his gaze, and for the first time didn't look away. "Maybe your luck's changing." The wind caught her hair, lifting it like a whisper across his shoulder. The world seemed to pause. 2 riders, 1 breath, a silence thick with everything they hadn't said. Beckett broke it gently. "We'll stay the night. The foreman here's an old friend. He won't ask questions." Rhea nodded. "I'm good with that." They rode down toward the lights, the horses' hooves soft against the dirt. The air smelled of hay and river water, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rhea felt something close to safety. When they reached the barn, a man stepped out, tall, broad, with grey in his beard and a lantern in his hand. "Beckett Vale," he said, grinning. "Thought you were dead or worse." "Been both," Beckett said. "Figured I'd try something different." The man laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're welcome here, same as before. And your friend?" Beckett looked at Rhea. "She's with me." That simple sentence shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but Rhea felt it. A warmth that started somewhere deep and quiet, the kind that didn't need permission to stay. Inside the barn, they tended to the horses, brushed away the dust and sweat. The smell of hay filled the air, familiar, grounding. Beckett moved slower than usual, his wound still tender, but he worked steady, sure. Rhea watched him from the stall's edge. The light from the lantern cast long shadows, tracing the strength in his shoulders, the curve of his jaw. She found herself wondering what it would be like to stop running, to just exist beside someone who didn't make her feel like she had to earn her space. When he noticed her looking, he smiled, small and knowing. "What?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just thinking." "Dangerous habit," she smirked. "So's breathing." He chuckled. "Then I guess we're both in trouble." After the horses were settled, they stepped outside. The night had gone full and blue, stars stitched tight across the sky. The sound of crickets filled the air, steady as a heartbeat. Beckett leaned against the fence. "Feels different here." Rhea nodded. "Like the world forgot to chase us. Maybe it finally lost our trail." They stood there in the quiet, the kind that hums with the weight of almosts. Rhea broke it first. "What'll you do now, Beckett Vale?" He thought for a long moment. "Work the land, fix what's broken, try not to make new ghosts." She smiled. "And when the road calls again?" He looked at her, eyes soft in the lantern glow. "Then I'll listen for whether it says your name or mine." Her breath caught. The space between them shrank, slow, inevitable. The sound of the night faded until there was only the crackle of the lantern and the rhythm of their breathing. Beckett reached out, his hand brushing the edge of her jaw. "You don't have to run any more, Rhea." Her eyes closed, her voice a whisper. "What if I stay?" "Then I'll make sure the desert never takes you again." The distance vanished. His lips found hers, not hurried, not claimed, just held. The kiss tasted of smoke and rain, and every road they'd both survived to reach this one quiet moment. When they finally pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his chest, listening to the slow, steady beat beneath his ribs. For the first time, it sounded like home. They stood like that for a long while, two souls the desert had tried to break, finally learning how to rest. If this story has reached a still place in your heart, stay close. Dawn will come again, and love will rise with it. Morning came quiet and golden, the kind that asks for stillness before words. The ranch was half awake. Soft sounds of buckets, a rooster far off, the whisper of wind through cottonwoods. Rhea stood on the porch, coffee cup in hand, watching the light stretch across the fields. The horses grazed in slow peace. Everything smelled of dew and hay and safety. She'd forgotten what that smelled like. Behind her, the door creaked. Beckett stepped out, clean shirt, hat in hand, the bandage under his sleeve hidden but not forgotten. His smile was faint, still carrying the tiredness of years, but now it had warmth in it, a warmth that stayed. "You're up early," he said. She sipped her coffee, eyes still on the horizon. "The desert's quieter before the day remembers what it owes us." He chuckled low. "You talk like a poet. I talk like someone who's seen too much dawn not to listen." He leaned on the railing beside her, shoulders brushing lightly. The touch was small, ordinary, and yet everything. After a long silence, he said, "I told the foreman I'd stay a while. He needs another set of hands. Decent pay, decent work." Rhea nodded. "Good for you." "For us," he corrected softly. She turned, caught his gaze. "You assume I'm staying?" He didn't smile this time, just looked at her the way a man does when he's done waiting for luck and started believing in choice. "No," he said. "I hope you're staying." The words hung there, honest and quiet. Rhea looked back toward the open land, where sunlight poured over the fences like blessing. For the first time, she didn't feel the pull of distance. No road whispered her name, no wind told her to go. Her chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to peace. She set the cup down, her voice soft. "Maybe I'm tired of running." Beckett's hand found hers, rough and certain. "Then rest here a while. Let the world catch up." She smiled, small and real. "Just a while." "That's how forever starts," he said. The morning deepened around them. The ranch stirred to life. Laughter from the barn, a dog barking, the rhythmic sound of work beginning. But for that moment, everything felt still, suspended between the past they'd survived and the future waiting just beyond the fence. Rhea leaned against him, the warmth of his shoulder familiar now, like firelight she could return to. The sun climbed higher, washing the sky clean. He turned to her, voice barely above the wind. "You ever wonder if we were meant to find each other?" She nodded. "No." "No?" he asked, smiling. "I don't wonder," she said. "I just know." And with that, the desert's silence broke into song, not with words, but with the easy rhythm of breathing shared, of hearts unguarded, of two lives finally done fighting the same lonely fight. They stood together as the day opened wide around them, and somewhere in that wide golden light, love became something real, not wild, not fragile, but steady, the kind you could build a life around. If this story has found a quiet home in your heart, let it stay. Love like this doesn't end when the credits fade. It just keeps riding with the wind.